The vibrant chime of my phone echoed through the bedroom, jarring me from a restless slumber. I glanced at the clock, 3:14 a.m. An uneasy feeling settled in my gut as I reached for the device. Work emergencies at this hour were rare, but not unheard of in my line of business. My fingers froze as I caught a glimpse of the screen. It wasn't a work notification, it was a message from an unknown number. Curiosity piqued. I swiped to unlock the phone, and my world shattered. "Can't wait to see you again, babe. That quickie in the supply closet was insane." The message was undoubtedly not meant for me, but the sender's identity was all too clear. Marissa, my cousin and supposed confidant, who had been staying with Derek and me to help during his recovery. Bile rose in my throat as I scrolled through the thread, each message more explicit than the last. The betrayal cut deeper with every lewd word, every suggestive emoji. Derek's affair with Marissa was laid bare before my eyes, the evidence irrefutable. I turned to face Derek's sleeping form, my vision blurred by unshed tears. How could he? How could they? Marissa was family, someone I had trusted implicitly. Yet there they were, carrying on a sordid affair right under my nose. Anger and hurt swirled within me, a tempestuous storm of emotions threatening to break loose. I longed to scream, to hurl accusations and demand answers, but the words stuck in my throat like shards of glass. Instead, I slipped out of bed, my movements robotic, and made my way to the living room. I collapsed onto the couch, clutching Derek's phone like a lifeline, its damning contents a stark reminder of the life I thought I knew crumbling around me. Hours ticked by, the first rays of dawn peeking through the curtains. I heard footsteps behind me, the telltale creak of the floorboards announcing Derek's presence. "Elena, what are you doing up so early?" he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. I pivoted to face him, my jaw clenched, and held up the phone, the incriminating messages splayed across the screen. "Care to explain this?" Derek's expression morphed from confusion to panic in an instant. I can explain," he stammered, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Explain what exactly?" I snapped, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. "How you've been sleeping with my cousin right under my nose, how you've been betraying me with someone I trusted." He opened his mouth, but I cut him off, unwilling to hear his excuses. "Save it, Derek. I don't want to hear your lies anymore." Anger and anguish welled up within me, threatening to spill over. I fought to maintain my composure, to cling to the last shreds of dignity I had left. Derek's lips pressed into a thin line, his eyes hardening. "If you hadn't been so wrapped up in your work all the time, maybe this wouldn't have happened." His words sliced through me like a knife, twisting the blade of betrayal deeper into my heart. In that moment, I knew our marriage was well and truly over. I rose from the couch, squaring my shoulders and meeting his gaze with unwavering resolve. "Get out." Derek opened his mouth to protest, but I silenced him with a shake of my head. "Just go, Derek. We're done." As he stormed out of the apartment, the weight of his betrayal finally hit me, and I sank to the floor, sobs racking my body. But amidst the pain and heartbreak, a newfound determination took root within me. They would pay for this. Both of them. In the days following Derek's explosive revelation, a fog of grief and disbelief enveloped me. I alternated between fits of rage and deep sorrow, grappling with the harsh reality of his betrayal. But as the initial shock subsided, a steely resolve took root. I would not be a victim, not anymore. I confided in Alex, my closest friend and a brilliant lawyer. His jaw tightened as I recounted the sordid details, his normally jovial demeanor replaced by a cold fury. "That lying, deceitful bastard," he seethed, slamming his fist on the table. "We're going to bury him, Elena. I promise you that." With Alex's guidance, I began meticulously gathering evidence of Derek's misdeeds, leaving no stone unturned. Late nights were spent combing through financial records, unearthing a trail of embezzlement and fraud that seemed to stretch back years. Derek had the audacity to confront me one evening as I pored over the damning documents. "What are you up to, Elena?" he demanded, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. I met his gaze head-on, refusing to flinch. "Funny, I was about to ask you the same thing, though I think I already know the answer." He scoffed, his lips curling into a contemptuous sneer. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Newsflash, sweetheart, you're just a pretty face. Without me, your precious company would be nothing." White-hot rage coursed through my veins, but I reined it in, forcing a tight smile. We'll see about that, won't we? As the weeks passed, the web of deceit surrounding Derek and Marissa grew increasingly tangled. Marissa had not only been complicit in the affair, but had actively aided Derek in siphoning funds from my company. I summoned her to my office, the weight of the evidence heavy in my hands. She sauntered in, her expression a sickening mix of arrogance and feigned innocence. "Elena, darling, what's this all about?" she simpered, batting her eyelashes. I slapped the stack of papers onto the desk, my teeth clenched. "Cut the act, Marissa. I know everything. The affair, the embezzlement. You two make me sick." Her facade crumbled, replaced by a sneer that twisted her once familiar features into an ugly mask. "Oh, please, like you're some paragon of virtue. You were never around, always too busy with your precious company to pay attention to Derek. He needed someone who could actually satisfy him in more ways than one." The venom in her words stung, but I refused to let her see me flinch. "You're both going to pay for what you've done," I vowed, my voice low and dangerous. Marissa threw back her head and laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "And how exactly do you plan to do that? Face it, Elena, you're powerless. Derek and I hold all the cards." I leaned forward, my gaze boring into hers with icy determination. "We'll see about that." As she swept out of the office, I allowed myself a grim smile. They thought they had won, but they had no idea what was coming. With Alex's help, I would dismantle their lives piece by piece, until they had nothing left but the consequences of their actions. The war had only just begun. In the wake of Marissa's taunting diatribe, a cold clarity washed over me. If I wanted to emerge victorious from this battle, I needed to arm myself to the teeth. Blind rage and impulsive actions would only play into Derek and Marissa's hands. No, I needed to be strategic, calculating, to fight fire with an inferno of my own making. I summoned Alex to my office, my expression grim. "It's time we took the gloves off," I stated, sliding the damning evidence across the desk towards him. His brow furrowed as he skimmed the documents, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "Son of a bitch has been bleeding your company dry for years," he muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. "Exactly, which is why we need to hit him where it hurts. His bank account." I leaned forward, my gaze steely. "I want you to freeze every asset, revoke all access to funds, the whole 9 yards. Derek thinks money is power? Let's see how powerful he feels when he's broke and exposed as the fraud he is." A feral grin spread across Alex's face. "Consider it done. I'll have the paperwork filed first thing tomorrow morning." As Alex left to set the wheels in motion, I turned my attention to another crucial front, protecting my own assets. Derek and Marissa may have thought they held all the cards, but I wasn't about to make it easy for them. I summoned my finance team, my expression grave. "Gentlemen, I'm afraid we have a situation on our hands." Over the next few hours, I worked tirelessly to transfer funds, liquidate investments, and batten down every financial hatch. By the time the sun rose the next morning, my assets were secured, safely out of Derek and Marissa's grubby paws. The first salvo had been fired. A few days later, Alex strode into my office, a triumphant gleam in his eye. "It's done. Derek's assets have been frozen, and the authorities are investigating his financial dealings." Relief washed over me, but I knew this was just the beginning. Derek would undoubtedly retaliate, and I had to be prepared. Sure enough, my phone rang later that evening, Derek's name flashing across the screen. I answered with a smirk. "Hello, dear husband." His voice was a low snarl, barely contained fury simmering beneath the surface. "What the hell did you do, Alina? My accounts are locked, my cards declined, everything's frozen." "Oh, I'm sorry, did I fail to mention?" I feigned innocence, unable to resist twisting the knife. "I'm taking what's mine, Derek. Every last penny you stole from me, from my company, you and your little mistress are going to pay for what you've done." There was a beat of silence, and then he erupted, a torrent of vile profanities spewing forth. "You conniving bitch! You think you've won, but you're dead wrong. This isn't over, not by a long shot." The line went dead, but his words only fueled my resolve. Let him rant and rave. I was holding all the cards now. With my assets secure and the law on my side, Derek and Marissa were nothing more than trapped rats, their world crumbling around them. I poured myself a glass of wine, allowing a self-satisfied smile to tug at my lips. The battle was far from over, but the tides had well and truly turned in my favor. They had started this war. but I was going to finish it and emerge victorious, no matter what it took. With Derek's assets frozen and the authorities sniffing around his financial dealings, it was time to unleash the next phase of my counterattack. I knew Derek wouldn't go down without a fight, but I was prepared for all-out war. I strode into Alex's office, my jaw set with grim determination. It's time we brought out the big guns. Alex looked up from his desk, eyebrows raised. You know I live for dramatic flair, but I'm going to need a bit more context here. I want to file for divorce and hit Derek with every legal claim in the book. Fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, the whole 9 yards. My voice was steely, brooking no argument. A feral grin spread across Alex's face. Now you're speaking my language. I'll have the paperwork drawn up immediately. True to his word, Alex had the divorce papers ready within days, complete with a laundry list of charges that would make any self-respecting criminal's head spin. I signed them with a flourish, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. Derek's going to fight this tooth and nail, you know that, right? Alex cautioned, his expression serious. I met his gaze levelly. I'm counting on it. The moment the papers were filed, all hell broke loose. Derek's lawyer, a smarmy little weasel of a man, descended upon me like a rabid dog, hurling threats and accusations. This is a gross overreaction, Mrs. Davis, he sneered, his beady eyes narrowed with disdain. My client may have made some indiscretions, but this legal onslaught is completely unwarranted. I arched an eyebrow, unimpressed. Indiscretions? Is that what you call defrauding a company and cheating on your wife with her own cousin? The weasel's face reddened, but I pressed on, relentless. Your client is a lying, thieving scumbag, and he's going to pay for what he's done, in full. As the legal battle raged on, Derek and Marissa's sordid affair became public knowledge, splashed across every tabloid and gossip rag. Suddenly, the perfect couple everyone had envied was a punchline, a cautionary tale of greed and betrayal. Derek tried to maintain his usual bravado, sneering at reporters and issuing terse, no comments, but I could see the cracks in his facade, the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Marissa, on the other hand, seemed to relish the attention, preening and posing for the cameras like a deranged socialite. That is, until the backlash from her own family hit. Her parents disowned her, her siblings cut off all contact. Even her friends abandoned her, appalled by her despicable actions. As for me, I weathered the storm with my head held high, refusing to be cowed or shamed. Derek and Marissa had made their bed, and now they could lie in it, squirming under the harsh spotlight of public scrutiny. The courtroom battles were brutal, with both sides flinging allegations and personal attacks like grenades. But thanks to Alex's legal prowess and the mountain of evidence we'd amassed, we emerged victorious time and again. Finally, after months of bitter legal warfare, the knockout blow was delivered. Derek was not only forced to relinquish control of my company, but found himself facing criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement. As the judge read out the verdict, I allowed myself a satisfied smile. Derek caught my gaze, his eyes burning with impotent rage and hatred. But I didn't care. He was finished. His life in ruins. The war was over, and I had won. With Derek's assets frozen and the legal noose tightening around his neck, I expected him to slink away into the shadows, tail tucked between his legs. But the man was nothing if not a glutton for punishment. I'd barely savored my courtroom victory when my phone rang, Derek's name flashing across the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered, bracing myself for the inevitable torrent of vitriol. You think you've won, don't you? He spat, his voice dripping with venom. Well, you're sadly mistaken. This isn't over, not by a long shot. I rolled my eyes, utterly unfazed by his empty bravado. Save your breath, Derek. The courts have ruled, and you've been exposed as the lying, thieving scumbag you are. It's over. There was a pause, and I could practically hear the gears turning in his devious little mind. Maybe for me, he conceded, his tone taking on a sinister edge. But what about your precious company? You really think you're going to be able to run that ship without me? A knot of dread formed in the pit of my stomach, but I refused to show any outward signs of concern. I've been running this company just fine for years, Derek. You were nothing but a leech, draining its resources for your own gain. He barked out a harsh laugh. Keep telling yourself that, sweetheart. But the truth is you're in way over your head without me. Just you wait. Your precious empire is going to come crashing down around you." The line went dead, but his words continued to echo in my mind, stoking the flames of doubt and uncertainty. Could he be right? Had I underestimated just how much control he'd wielded over the company's inner workings? I pushed the thoughts aside, refocusing my energy on securing my position and safeguarding the company from any further sabotage. With Derek's influence excised like a cancer, I set about purging his loyalists from key positions, replacing them with trusted allies. It wasn't long before the first bombshell hit. An anonymous whistleblower came forward, alleging that Derek had been cooking the books and falsifying financial reports for years. The news sent shockwaves through the company, triggering a mass exodus of investors and clients fleeing the perceived instability. I called an emergency meeting with my executive team, my expression grim. "All right, people, we have a crisis on our hands. Derek's left us a lovely parting gift in the form of cooked books and shady dealings." Panic flickered across their faces, but I silenced it with a raised hand. "But that ends today. From this moment on, we're going to scrub this company clean, leave no stone unturned. We're going to root out every last trace of Derek's corruption and rebuild from the ground up." There were murmurs of assent, but one voice piped up from the back of the room. "With all due respect, ma'am, how can we be sure you're not just as compromised as Derek was?" The accusation hung in the air like a lead balloon, but I met it head-on, unflinching. Because I'm not the one who betrayed this company for personal gain. I'm not the one who cheated and lied and stole. Derek did this, not me. I swept my gaze across the room, my expression resolute. "I know I've got my work cut out for me in terms of regaining your trust, but I'm going to prove to each and every one of you that this company is in good hands, my hands." It was an uphill battle, but slowly, surely, I began to turn the tide. One by one, I won over the doubters, the skeptics, through sheer force of will and an unwavering commitment to transparency and integrity. As for Derek and Marissa, their fall from grace was as swift as it was brutal. With the legal walls closing in and their reputations in tatters, they found themselves social pariahs, shunned and ostracized by their former circles. I caught wind of Marissa's spectacular downfall. She'd been fired from her cushy marketing job, her severance package revoked in light of the scandal. Her family had disowned her, and her so-called friends had abandoned her, like rats fleeing a sinking ship. As for Derek, well, let's just say that his newfound status as a convicted felon didn't exactly open many doors in the business world. The once mighty titan had been reduced to a punchline, a cautionary tale of hubris and greed. And me? I stood at the helm of my company, battered but unbroken, a phoenix rising from the ashes of Derek's betrayal. The road ahead was long and arduous, but I was ready to rebuild, to reclaim what was mine, and to emerge stronger than ever before. Derek and Marissa had tried to break me, but in the end they had only forged me into steel. In the aftermath of Derek's dramatic unraveling, a sense of grim satisfaction washed over me. The lying, cheating scumbag had finally received his comeuppance, his life in ruins, a fitting punishment for the devastation he'd wrought. But even as I savored my hard-won victory, a nagging sense of unease gnawed at me. Derek's final threat still echoed in my mind, a dark promise that my struggles were far from over. Sure enough, it wasn't long before the other shoe dropped. I was in the middle of a meeting with the marketing team, discussing strategies to rebuild our brand's tarnished image, when Alex burst through the door, his expression thunderous. "Elena, we need to talk. Now." His tone brooked no argument. I excused myself, dread coiling in the pit of my stomach, and followed Alex to his office. He wasted no time in dropping the bombshell. "Derek's filed a lawsuit against you and the company," he growled, slamming a thick stack of papers onto his desk. "He's claiming you orchestrated a campaign of defamation and destroyed his career out of spite." White-hot fury surged through my veins as I scanned the documents. Are you kidding me? After everything that Snake did, the fraud, the embezzlement, the affair, he has the audacity to play the victim? Alex held up a placating hand. I know, and trust me, this case is weaker than a wet paper bag. But it's still going to be a massive headache, not to mention a PR nightmare. I gritted my teeth, steeling my resolve. So be it. We'll fight this like we've fought everything else Derek's thrown our way, with the truth on our side. The ensuing legal battle was nothing short of a circus, a spectacle of mudslinging and personal attacks that played out in the public eye. Derek's lawyers painted him as a tragic figure, a devoted family man, driven to desperate measures by a cold, neglectful wife. I scoffed at the absurd notion, but the accusations stung nonetheless. How dare he try to twist the narrative, to rewrite history, and absolve himself of his own despicable actions? In the end, though, facts proved far more potent than fiction. With the mountain of evidence we'd amassed, financial records, witness testimonies, even Derek's own incriminating messages, his flimsy case crumbled like a house of cards. The final nail in the coffin came when Marissa took the stand. Faced with the prospect of perjury charges, she sang like a canary, spilling every sordid detail of her affair with Derek and their conspiracy to defraud my company. I'll never forget the look on Derek's face as Marissa delivered her damning testimony, his mask of righteous indignation melting away to reveal the sniveling coward beneath. In that moment, he knew he was beaten, his last desperate gambit thwarted. When the verdict finally came down, it was a resounding victory for our side. Derek's lawsuit was dismissed, and he was ordered to pay exorbitant legal fees and damages. But that wasn't the end of his humiliation. As I left the courthouse, flanked by Alex and a throng of reporters, Derek emerged from the building, his head hung in defeat. Our eyes met, and I saw a flicker of pure, unadulterated hatred burning in his gaze. "You won't get away with this," he snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "I'll make sure you pay for what you've done, even if it's the last thing I do." A mirthless chuckle escaped my lips as I regarded the pathetic shell of a man before me. "You're the one who's going to pay, Derek, for the rest of your miserable life." With that, I turned on my heel and strode away, leaving him to stew in the wreckage of his own making. The war was over, and I had emerged victorious, but at what cost? As the celebrations died down and the dust settled, I found myself alone in my office, staring out at the city skyline. What should have been a moment of triumph felt hollow somehow, tainted by the bitter aftertaste of revenge. Had it all been worth it? The lies, the deception, the scorched earth tactics? Or had I lost a piece of myself along the way, sacrificed on the altar of vindication? A quiet voice in the back of my mind whispered that perhaps there was another way, a path that didn't involve sinking to Derek's level of depravity. But it was too late for such musings now. The die had been cast, and there was no going back. All I could do was soldier on, rebuild what had been broken, and pray that the hollow ache in my chest would eventually fade. Derek and Marissa had been vanquished, but at what price? Only time would tell if the cost of my vengeance was one I could truly stomach. In the weeks following my courtroom triumph over Derek's petty lawsuit, an uneasy truce settled over the battlefield. The war may have been won, but the scars ran deep for both sides. I threw myself into the task of rebuilding, working tirelessly to restore my company's tarnished reputation and repair the damage wrought by Derek's deception. With each small victory, a new client, a positive press mention, a rising stock price, the hollow ache in my chest began to fade, replaced by a newfound sense of purpose. Derek, on the other hand, had well and truly fallen from grace. His once glittering career lay in ruins, the mighty titan reduced to a cautionary tale. I caught wind of his sordid downfall through the grapevine. No reputable firm would touch him, his reputation forever tainted by his criminal convictions. As for Marissa, well, let's just say karma has a way of evening the scales. It was a crisp autumn morning when Alex strode into my office, a triumphant gleam in his eye. "You'll never guess what fresh hell our favorite dysfunctional duo has landed themselves in," he announced, settling into the chair opposite my desk. I arched an eyebrow, equal parts intrigued and wary. "Do I even want to know?" Alex's grin widened as he slid a folder across the desk. "See for yourself." I flipped it open, my eyes widening as I scanned the contents. "You can't be serious." "As a heart attack," Alex confirmed. "Derek and Marissa are being charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, racketeering, you name it. Seems our little whistleblower friend was just the tip of the iceberg." A bitter chuckle escaped my lips as I digested the news. I never thought I'd see the day. "Well, believe it, sister," Alex crowed. "Those two snakes are finally getting the book thrown at them. Hard." In the days that followed, the sordid details of Derek and Marissa's far-reaching criminal enterprise trickled out, each revelation more shocking than the last. They'd been living a double life, using my company as a front to funnel illicit funds, evade taxes, and line their own pockets. The evidence was damning, overwhelming, and this time there was no wiggle room, no legal loopholes for Derek's team of shysters to exploit. He and Marissa were well and truly boxed in, the walls closing in around them. I'll never forget the day they were led into the courtroom in handcuffs, a pathetic sight to behold. Derek, once so poised and confident, hung his head in shame, his expensive suit rumpled and disheveled. Marissa, for her part, maintained a haughty air of defiance, but I could see the fear flickering in her eyes. The trial was little more than a formality, a public crucifixion to lay bare their myriad sins. Witness after witness took the stand, each more damaging than the last, until the weight of their guilt became too massive to deny. When the verdict finally came down, guilty on all counts, a weight lifted from my shoulders. It was over, truly and finally over. Derek and Marissa's twisted game of deceit and betrayal had been blown wide open, their misdeeds exposed for the world to see. As they were led away in chains, Marissa caught my eye, her gaze burning with impotent rage. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't expected: pity. Here were two souls so consumed by greed and hubris that they'd sacrificed everything, their reputations, their freedom, their very souls. Derek, on the other hand, refused to meet my gaze, his eyes downcast in bitter resignation. The mighty had well and truly fallen, brought low by his own avarice and depravity. In the aftermath, as the dust settled and the media circus died down, I found myself standing atop the rubble of our once idyllic lives, a victor surveying the hard-won battlefield. It was finally over. But as I looked out over the smoldering wreckage, I couldn't help but wonder, at what cost had this victory come? What parts of myself had I sacrificed in pursuit of vengeance? And was it all truly worth it in the end? Only time would tell, I supposed, as I turned my back on the past and strode forward into an uncertain future. The war was won, but the scars would linger. In the months following Derek and Marissa's dramatic downfall, an uneasy calm settled over my life. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a strange, unsettling calm in its wake. With the legal battles and PR firestorms firmly in the rearview mirror, I found myself adrift, unmoored from the singular purpose that had driven me for so long. Vengeance had been my guiding star, my reason for breathing, and now that it had been achieved, I felt oddly hollow, untethered. But I'm getting ahead of myself. In the immediate aftermath of Derek and Marissa's sentencing, a wave of relief washed over me. The nightmare was finally over, the demons that had haunted me for so long vanquished. I could breathe again, live again, free from the weight of their betrayal. Or so I thought. The first few weeks passed in a blur of celebration and congratulations. Alex threw a raucous party at his place, a veritable who's who of the city's legal elite in attendance, all eager to toast the downfall of the dastardly duo. I plastered on a smile and made the rounds, accepting drinks and backslaps with practiced grace. But underneath the veneer of polite socialization, a part of me felt off, out of place, like an interloper at my own victory party. As the weeks stretched into months, that sense of disconnection only deepened. Logically, I knew I should have been over the moon. I'd not only survived Derek's betrayal but emerged victorious, my reputation and company intact. But the nagging feeling persisted, like a tiny voice whispering in the back of my mind. Was it really a victory if it had cost me a piece of my soul? I tried to lose myself in work, throwing every ounce of my energy into rebuilding my company's battered public image. New initiatives were launched, charitable foundations established, all in the name of scrubbing the stain left by Derek's misdeeds. And yet, no matter how many 16-hour days I pulled, how many millions I funneled into good PR, that empty ache lingered, a constant companion I couldn't seem to shake. It all came to a head one night as I sat alone in my office, staring out at the city skyline. A half-empty bottle of scotch sat on my desk, the amber liquid swirling in the glass clutched in my hand. A soft rap at the door roused me from my reverie. "Come in," I called out, not bothering to turn around. "Working late again, I see." Alex's familiar drawl reached my ears as he settled into the chair opposite my desk. "You know, they make these newfangled things called vacations these days. Might want to look into one." I huffed out a mirthless chuckle, swirling the contents of my glass. You know me, Alex. No rest for the wicked and all that. He was silent for a beat, studying me with those perceptive eyes of his. You don't seem terribly celebratory for someone who just took down public enemy number 1. I sighed, finally meeting his gaze. I don't know, Alex. I should be over the moon, right? Derek and Marissa are behind bars, my company's back on track. But I trailed off, struggling to put the gnawing disquiet into words. But something's still eating at you, he finished, giving me a knowing look. You got your revenge, Elena. The question is, was it worth it? His words hung in the air, heavy and laden with implication. Was it worth it? The lies, the deception, the scorched earth campaign that had nearly consumed me? In that moment, the weight of everything I'd sacrificed in pursuit of vengeance came crashing down around me. The person I'd allowed myself to become, the moral lines I'd crossed, had it truly been a fair trade for seeing Derek punished? The bitter taste of self-loathing flooded my mouth, and I slammed my glass down with a trembling hand. No, it wasn't worth it. The admission hung between us, raw and painful. After a long, weighty silence, Alex spoke up, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. Then it's time to leave the past in the past, my friend. Time to start over, to become the person you want to be, not the one forged in the fires of revenge. His words rang true, a clarion call amidst the storm of self-doubt that had consumed me for so long. It was time to let go, to shed the burdens of the past and step into the light. A fragile smile tugged at my lips as I met Alex's gaze, the first sparks of hope flickering to life in my chest. You're right, I whispered, the weight already beginning to lift from my shoulders. It's time for a new beginning. The road ahead would be long, fraught with challenges and inner demons to conquer, but for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt a sense of purpose unclouded by rage or thirst for retribution. It was time to be reborn, to rise like a phoenix from the ashes of my own making. Derek and Marissa's betrayal may have broken me once, but I was determined to emerge from the crucible stronger, wiser, my soul intact. A new chapter was beginning, and this time the pen was firmly in my own hand. The shattering of glass pierced the silence of our living room. A framed photo lay smashed on the hardwood floor, the shards of glass glinting like tiny daggers. My hands trembled as I stared at the intruder standing before me, a woman clutching the hand of a young boy, his eyes wide with confusion. Richard, my husband of 23 years, stepped forward, his face ashen. Dana, this is Jenna, and Lucas. They're my family, too. The words hung in the air, a suffocating weight pressing against my chest. I opened my mouth, but no sound escaped. How could this be happening? My perfect life, the life I had fought so hard to build, was crumbling before my eyes. You have another family? I finally managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. How could you do this to us? Richard's gaze dropped to the floor, unable to meet mine. I'm sorry, Dana. I never meant for it to go this far. Jenna shifted uncomfortably, her grip on Lucas tightening. Richard told me you knew about us. He said you were okay with the arrangement. My heart pounded in my ears as I struggled to comprehend the depth of his deception. Anger surged through me, burning away the shock. You lied to her, too? You're a coward, Richard. A coward and a liar. Amelia, our 22-year-old daughter, emerged from her bedroom, her eyes wide with confusion. Mom, what's going on? Before I could respond, Richard stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Amelia, honey, I have something to tell you. Save it, I snapped, my voice trembling with rage. You've done enough damage. Get out of our house, Richard. Get out and never come back. Amelia's brow furrowed, and she looked from me to Richard, her gaze finally settling on Jenna and the child. Understanding dawned on her face, and her expression hardened. You sick bastard, she spat, her words dripping with venom. Richard flinched as if struck. Amelia, please, let me explain. No, I shouted, my voice raw. You don't get to explain anything. You've been living a lie, and now the truth is out. You made your choices, Richard, and now you have to face the consequences. Jenna's grip on Lucas loosened, and she took a tentative step forward. Dana, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I held up a hand, cutting her off. Just go. Take your son and get out of my house. I don't want to see either of you ever again. Tears welled in Jenna's eyes, but she nodded, her shoulders slumping in defeat. She turned and fled, Lucas trailing behind her, casting one last bewildered glance over his shoulder. Richard stood motionless, his face a mask of anguish. "Dana, please, we can work through this. I love you." I shook my head, my heart shattering with each word. "No, Richard, you lost the right to love me the moment you betrayed our family. Our marriage is over." As the weight of my words settled over us, a heavy silence descended. In that moment, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The life I had known, the love I had cherished, was gone, shattered like the broken frame on the floor. The weeks following Richard's departure were a blur. Amelia and I existed in a state of numb disbelief, the weight of his betrayal suffocating us with each passing day. We tried to resume our normal routines, but the empty spaces he left behind served as constant reminders of the life we had lost. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table, staring vacantly at a stack of unpaid bills, Amelia emerged from her room, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, her voice quivering with barely contained anger. I looked up, my heart sinking at the expression on her face. "What is it, honey?" Amelia tossed a thick manila envelope onto the table, scattering the bills. "I found this in Dad's office. It's everything. Bank statements, credit card receipts, proof of his double life." I reached for the envelope with trembling hands, dread coiling in my stomach. As I rifled through the contents, a sickening realization dawned on me. Richard hadn't just been unfaithful. He had been embezzling from his company, siphoning funds to support his secret family. "That bastard," Amelia spat, her fists clenched at her sides. "He's been lying to us for years, Mom. He's been stealing, cheating, and God knows what else." I felt bile rise in my throat as the full extent of Richard's deception became clear. "How could he do this to us?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Amelia's expression hardened, her eyes blazing with determination. "He's going to pay for this, Mom. We're going to make sure he pays." I stared at her, uncertainty gnawing at me. "What are you saying, Amelia?" She leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "I'm saying we expose him for the lying, thieving scumbag he is. We take all this evidence to his company, to the police. We burn his life to the ground, just like he did to ours." A part of me recoiled at the thought of such vengeance, but another, darker part couldn't deny the appeal of seeing Richard suffer the consequences of his actions. "What about Jenna and the kid?" I asked, my voice trembling. "They're caught up in this, too." Amelia's expression softened, just for a moment. "We'll reach out to Jenna. Maybe she'll see reason and help us take him down." I nodded slowly, my mind whirling with 1,000 different thoughts and emotions. "Okay," I said finally, my resolve hardening. "We'll do it. We'll make him pay for what he's done." Amelia's grim smile sent a shiver down my spine. "Good. It's time we showed that lying piece of garbage what happens when you mess with the Whitaker women." As she turned and stalked back to her room, I couldn't help but wonder if we were embarking on a path we might one day regret. But in that moment, all I could feel was a burning desire for retribution. A need to see Richard suffer as we had suffered, to make him pay for the lies that had shattered our lives. In the days that followed, I found myself standing at a crossroads, torn between the desire for vengeance and the fear of diving headlong into a path of destruction. As I pored over the evidence Amelia had uncovered, the weight of Richard's betrayal threatened to crush me. Amelia, however, remained resolute, her determination unwavering. "We can't let him get away with this, Mom," she insisted, her voice laced with urgency. "He needs to face the consequences of his actions." I nodded numbly, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and emotions. A part of me longed to see Richard suffer, to watch as his carefully constructed facade crumbled around him. But another part, the part that still clung to the remnants of the love I once felt, recoiled at the thought of such vindictiveness. "What if we go too far?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What if we become the monsters we're trying to destroy?" Amelia's expression softened, and she reached across the table to grip my hand. "Mom, we're not the ones who created this mess. We're just fighting to reclaim what's ours, our dignity, our self-respect. Richard is the one who chose to lie and cheat. He's the monster here." Her words resonated deep within me, igniting a spark of determination that had been flickering dangerously close to extinguishment. She was right. Richard had brought this upon himself, and it was time he faced the music. "You're right," I said, squeezing her hand. We can't let him get away with this. We need to take him down, once and for all. Amelia's eyes gleamed with a mixture of relief and anticipation. Good, then let's get to work. Over the next few days, we pored over the evidence, meticulously piecing together a timeline of Richard's deceit. Bank statements, credit card receipts, and damning emails painted a picture of a man consumed by greed and selfishness, willing to sacrifice everything, including his family, for his own desires. As we worked, I could feel the anger simmering within me, a slow burn that threatened to consume me if left unchecked. Each new revelation, each fresh betrayal, stoked the flames of my fury until I could barely contain the rage that coursed through my veins. Finally, we had everything we needed, a damning dossier of Richard's misdeeds, a veritable mountain of evidence that would bury him beneath the weight of his own lies. "It's time," Amelia said, her voice steely with determination. "Time to make that bastard pay." I nodded, my jaw clenched tight. Yes, it's time to end this, once and for all. As we stood there, united in our quest for retribution, I knew there was no turning back. Richard had made his choices, and now he would face the consequences, no matter how steep the price. With our dossier of evidence against Richard firmly in hand, Amelia and I knew it was time to take action. We couldn't move forward alone, not if we wanted to ensure Richard faced the full weight of his crimes. "We need help," Amelia said grimly, her fingers drumming against the tabletop. "Legal help." I nodded, my stomach churning with a mixture of apprehension and anticipation. "You're right. We'll need an attorney, someone who can navigate the legal system and make sure Richard can't wriggle his way out of this." Amelia's eyes narrowed, her jaw set in a hard line. "I know just the person." A few days later, we found ourselves seated across from Samantha Kendrick, a no-nonsense attorney with a reputation for taking on high-profile cases. As we laid out the evidence before her, her expression remained inscrutable, betraying none of the shock or disgust we had expected. "This is quite a dossier," she said at last, her voice calm and measured. "If even half of these allegations are true, your husband is in deep trouble." Amelia leaned forward, her eyes blazing with intensity. "Every single word is true, Miss Kendrick. That lying, cheating scumbag has been deceiving us for years, stealing from his company to fund his double life." Samantha held up a hand, silencing Amelia's outburst. "I believe you, Miss Whitaker. But belief alone won't be enough to convict your husband. We'll need concrete evidence, a paper trail that leaves no doubt as to his guilt." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. "We understand. What do you need from us?" Over the next few weeks, Samantha guided us through the process of collecting additional evidence, ensuring that every I was dotted and every T was crossed. Her meticulous attention to detail was both reassuring and unsettling, a constant reminder of the gravity of the situation we found ourselves in. As our case against Richard grew stronger, Amelia and I faced another hurdle, the question of what to do about Jenna and her son, Lucas. They were collateral damage in Richard's web of lies, innocent victims caught up in his selfish scheme. "We should reach out to her," Amelia said one evening, her voice laced with a surprising note of compassion. "She might be willing to help us, especially if it means protecting Lucas." I hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. What if she's loyal to Richard? What if she refuses to cooperate? Amelia's expression hardened. "Then we'll have to find another way. But we owe it to ourselves and to her to at least try." In the end, Jenna proved to be an unexpected ally, her anger and hurt at Richard's deception eclipsing any lingering loyalty she might have felt. She provided us with a wealth of information, corroborating our evidence and filling in the gaps in Richard's carefully constructed lies. As the final pieces fell into place, a sense of grim determination settled over us. We had done everything in our power to ensure that Richard would face the consequences of his actions, no matter how painful or devastating they might be. "It's time," Samantha said, her voice quiet but resolute. "Time to bring him down." Amelia and I exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between us. There was no turning back now. The wheels of justice had been set in motion, and Richard's world was about to come crashing down around him. As the days ticked by, a sense of foreboding settled over our household. Despite our meticulous preparations, a nagging doubt lingered in the back of my mind. What if Richard somehow managed to evade justice? What if, after everything we'd been through, he still found a way to escape the consequences of his actions. Amelia, ever the voice of reason, brushed aside my concerns with a wave of her hand. "He's not getting away this time, Mom. We've got him dead to rights." Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. It was as if a storm was brewing on the horizon, and we were caught in its inexorable path. My fears were confirmed one evening when Samantha called, her usually unflappable demeanor replaced by a sense of urgency. "We may have a problem," she said without preamble. "I've received word that your husband is planning to flee the country." The news hit me like a punch to the gut, stealing the breath from my lungs. "What? When? How?" Samantha's voice was grim. "From what my sources tell me, he's been liquidating assets and making arrangements to leave the country within the next few days. He's taking Jenna and the boy with him." Anger surged through me, hot and pulsing. The coward was running, trying to escape the consequences of his actions just as we were closing in. "That lying, spineless bastard," Amelia snarled, her hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. "He's not getting away that easily." I drew in a shaky breath, forcing myself to remain calm. "What do we do, Samantha? How do we stop him?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost picture Samantha weighing her options. We move forward with our plan, but we do it now, before he has a chance to disappear. We confront him, hit him with everything we've got, the evidence, the charges, all of it. We take away his ability to run. Amelia nodded, her jaw set in a hard line. "Let's do it. I'll call Jenna, make sure she's on board." As I hung up the phone, a sense of determination washed over me. We were so close, so tantalizingly close to seeing Richard face the consequences of his actions. I couldn't, let him wriggle free, not after everything he'd put us through. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity as we finalized our plans. Jenna, her loyalty to Richard long since evaporated, agreed to testify against him, providing a damning first-hand account of his deception and manipulation. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. As we made our way to Richard's office, the weight of the moment pressed down upon us like a physical force. This was it. The culmination of weeks of planning, of pain and anger, and a burning desire for justice. Samantha squeezed my arm reassuringly. "It's going to be okay," she murmured. "We've got this." I nodded, forcing a tight smile. "I know. It's time for Richard to face the music." As we stepped into the building, I could feel the storm gathering around us, the winds of change whipping at our backs. There was no turning back now. The only way out was through, and I was determined to see this through to the bitter end, no matter the cost. The tension in the air was palpable as we strode into Richard's office, our footsteps echoing like thunderclaps in the hushed stillness. Samantha took the lead, her shoulders squared and her gaze unwavering, while Amelia and I flanked her on either side, our faces set in grim determination. Richard looked up from his desk, his expression morphing from surprise to confusion to outright panic as he registered our presence. "Dana? Amelia? What's going on?" Before he could say another word, Samantha stepped forward, brandishing a thick manila envelope. "Richard Whittaker, you're under investigation for embezzlement, fraud, and adultery." The color drained from Richard's face as the weight of Samantha's words sank in. "What? That's absurd. You can't possibly believe these ridiculous accusations." Amelia's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Cut the crap, Dad. We know everything. The lies, the cheating, the secret family. It's all over." Richard's eyes darted back and forth, his mind clearly racing to concoct some new web of deception. "Jenna told you, didn't she? That lying little bee?" "Don't you dare!" I cut him off, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. "Don't you dare try to pin this on Jenna or anyone else. This is your doing, Richard. Your lies, your betrayal." Samantha stepped forward again, her expression impassive. "We have irrefutable evidence of your misdeeds, Mr. Whittaker. Bank statements, financial records, eyewitness testimony, all of it points to a pattern of embezzlement and fraud stretching back years." Richard's face contorted in a snarl of rage. "You think you can take me down with some flimsy evidence and trumped-up charges? I'll bury you all in lawsuits, you hear me? This isn't over, not by a long shot." Amelia's laughter was cold and derisive. "Keep telling yourself that, Dad. Your days of lying and cheating are over. You're finished." As if on cue, the door to Richard's office burst open, and a trio of stern-faced security guards entered, flanked by 2 police officers. "Richard Whittaker, you're under arrest for embezzlement and fraud. You have the right to remain silent." The world seemed to slow as the officers approached, their movements deliberate and inexorable. Richard's mask of bravado crumbled, his eyes widening in panic as the gravity of the situation finally sank in. "No, wait, you don't understand," he sputtered, his hands raised in a futile gesture of surrender. "This is all a mistake. Dana, please, you have to believe me." But his pleas fell on deaf ears as the officers seized him, roughly spinning him around and snapping the handcuffs into place. As they led him away, his gaze met mine, and for a fleeting moment I saw a glimmer of the man I had once loved, the man who had promised to cherish and protect me, the man who had sworn to love me until the end of time. Then the moment passed, and all I saw was a stranger, a man consumed by greed and selfishness, a man who had sacrificed everything for his own twisted desires. And in that instant, I knew that the Richard what had loved was gone, lost forever in the tangled web of his own lies. As the door swung shut behind him, a profound silence descended upon the room, broken only by the faint sound of Amelia's ragged breathing. We had done it. We had brought Richard Whittaker to his knees, exposed his lies for the world to see. But even as a sense of grim satisfaction washed over me, I couldn't help but wonder if the price we had paid was too high. Had our quest for vengeance cost us more than we could ever hope to regain? Only time would tell. In the aftermath of Richard's arrest, a surreal calm settled over our lives. After the whirlwind of emotions and the relentless pursuit of justice, the sudden stillness felt almost suffocating. Amelia and I sat in silence, staring at the now empty space where Richard's presence had once loomed large. It was as if a weight had been lifted from our shoulders, but in its place lingered a hollow ache, the echoes of a life we had once known, now forever altered. "Do you think it was worth it?" Amelia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I considered her question, turning it over in my mind like a puzzle with no clear solution. "I don't know," I admitted finally. "Part of me feels like we did the right thing, that he got what he deserved, but another part—" My voice trailed off, the words catching in my throat. Amelia nodded, her expression somber. "Yeah, I know what you mean." In the days that followed, we learned the full extent of Richard's betrayal. The embezzlement charges alone were staggering, with evidence suggesting he had siphoned off hundreds of thousands of dollars from his company over the years. But it was the personal revelations that cut deepest. The secret bank accounts, the hidden assets, the paper trail of lies that stretched back nearly a decade. Jenna, it seemed, had been just one in a long line of mistresses, a mere footnote in Richard's sordid chronicle of infidelity. And poor Lucas, that innocent child caught in the crossfire of his father's selfish actions, was left to pick up the pieces of a life he had never asked for. As the media frenzy swirled around us, Amelia and I retreated into ourselves, seeking solace in the quiet moments away from the prying eyes and endless questions. We had sacrificed so much in our pursuit of vengeance, and now that the dust had settled, we were left to confront the consequences of our choices. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Jenna standing on the doorstep, her eyes rimmed with tears. "Dana," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I just wanted to say thank you for everything." I blinked, taken aback by her unexpected gratitude. "Jenna, I don't know what to say." She shook her head, a sad smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "You gave me the strength to break free, to see Richard for the monster he truly is. I'll never be able to repay that debt." As she turned to leave, I found my voice once more. "Jenna, wait." She paused, her eyes questioning. "What will you do now?" I asked. "With Lucas, I mean?" Jenna's expression hardened, a steely resolve settling over her features. "I'll raise him to be a better man than his father, to know the value of honesty, loyalty, and integrity. Richard may have given him life, but I'll make sure he never inherits his father's sins." With those words, she was gone, disappearing into the gathering dusk as abruptly as she had arrived. As I watched her retreating figure, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope amidst the lingering sadness and regret. Perhaps in the end our quest for vengeance had achieved something greater than mere retribution. Perhaps, by exposing Richard's lies and holding him accountable, we had created a ripple effect, a chance for others like Jenna and Lucas to break free from the chains of his deception and forge a better path forward. As the last rays of sunlight faded, casting long shadows across the room, I realized that our journey was far from over. The road ahead would be long and arduous, paved with difficult choices and painful realizations. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I allowed myself to believe that we might just make it through. Battered and bruised, perhaps, but stronger for having weathered the storm. The weeks following Richard's arrest were a whirlwind of chaos and change. As the legal proceedings ground on, Amelia and I found ourselves thrust into the harsh glare of the media spotlight, our private lives suddenly laid bare for the world to dissect and analyze. Through it all, we clung to each other, a united front against the storm of scrutiny and judgment that seemed to rage endlessly around us. Samantha, our steadfast ally, guided us through the legal quagmire, her unwavering presence a constant source of strength and support. "It won't be easy," she warned us, her expression grave. "Richard's lawyers will fight tooth and nail to discredit you, to paint you as vindictive and irrational. You need to be prepared for that." Amelia's jaw clenched, her eyes burning with a fierce determination. "Let them try. We have the truth on our side, and that's all that matters." As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the weight of our decision began to take its toll. The sleepless nights, the endless questioning, the constant reminder of the life we had lost, it all threatened to crush us beneath its unbearable weight. But through it all, we persevered, buoyed by an unshakable belief that we had done the right thing. Richard's web of lies had been unraveled, his carefully constructed facade torn down brick by brick. He would face the consequences of his actions, no matter how long or arduous the road ahead might be. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the day of reckoning arrived. Richard, his once confident demeanor replaced by a pallid, haunted expression, stood before the judge, his fate hanging in the balance. As the charges were read aloud, embezzlement, fraud, adultery, a hush fell over the courtroom. Even the most seasoned journalists and legal experts seemed taken aback by the sheer magnitude of his misdeeds. Amelia and I sat in the front row, our hands clasped together in a silent show of solidarity. Jenna was there too, her eyes fixed on Richard with a mixture of anger and pity. When the verdict was finally announced, guilty on all counts, a collective gasp rippled through the room. Richard's shoulders slumped, his head bowing in defeat as the weight of his sins finally came crashing down upon him. In the aftermath, as the media circus swirled around us once more, Amelia and I found ourselves clinging to each other, tears of relief and sorrow mingling on our cheeks. "It's over," Amelia whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "It's finally over." I nodded, my throat constricted by a torrent of conflicting emotions. The road ahead was still shrouded in uncertainty, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I could see a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. In the days and weeks that followed, we began to piece our lives back together, one fragile step at a time. Jenna, her custody of Lucas secured, reached out to us, and an unlikely bond of understanding began to form. We were survivors, united by the scars of Richard's betrayal, but determined to forge a new path forward. As for Richard, his fate was sealed. A lengthy prison sentence, his once promising future reduced to a mere footnote in the annals of his own hubris and greed. But even as the world around us moved on, the echoes of our ordeal lingered, a constant reminder of the price we had paid for justice. The road to healing would be long and arduous, paved with difficult choices and painful realizations. Yet, as I stood on the precipice of this new chapter, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope, a belief that, no matter how dark the night might seem, the dawn would eventually break, ushering in a new era of peace and redemption. For in the end, that was the true legacy of our quest for vengeance. Not the destruction of one man, but the reclamation of our own strength, our own resilience, our own indomitable spirit. And as the first rays of sunlight peeked over the horizon, casting a warm glow across the room, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, united in our determination to forge a brighter future, one built on the ashes of the past, but rising ever higher toward the promise of a new dawn.